unfortunately, we live in a time where mass shootings, school shootings are something that happen seems like a few times a year. Um, Very scary thing, very tragic situation each time. But this one does have a bit of a different feel. It's something that, uh, boy, I don't know. It was a Christian school. It was a transgender shooter. Uh, even if we haven't seen the manifesto yet, we haven't seen for sure what was going through the shooter's mind. The reactions have been more than telling. What we've seen from media, what we've seen from politicians, what we've seen just from humans taking different sides of this. And so let's go ahead and just kind of give reactions, give what your takeaway is. Again, from the shooting itself, there's not a whole lot to say. The information, some of it has been withheld. Um, Other than that being a very tragic, sad situation, we're all in the Nashville area, and so this is obviously hit very close to home around here. But let's talk about the reaction a little bit. What have you guys seen? What do you think is coming from all of this?
Oh, one of the things you just brought up was something I wanted to bring up about this being my hometown, and your guys, close to y'all's hometown now as far as where you currently live. But I've lived here, quite a bit longer, and man, it really was a gut punch, not just to see and to read about the fact that it was 20 miles away from where I live, but then to see that it was a private Christian school, then to see that it was a private Christian school that went up to only sixth graders. This was not your standard Columbine high school shooting. This was a school that, again, kindergarten to sixth grade. Um, Again, just a gut punch there for me personally, reading and hearing about it. But one of the things that obvious, it's rather obvious, but it's one of the things that, as somebody, Jack referenced, we see and hear about school shootings, unfortunately, more on the regular basis than the way things used to be. And this one did feel different. It felt whether that be because the person was identifying as transgender, whether it be because it felt targeted. This felt like something that was two conflicting worldviews just combating each other. And what it ended with, again, gunfire resulting in the death of six people, three of them very young children. And again, I think to some extent, these shootings, these mass shootings that take place, when we hear about them, we kind of assume that maybe it was random, maybe it was something just they picked a spot and just decided to, again, go crazy. This one didn't seem like that. This one seemed, again, from the things that I've read, the things that I've heard, seemed very different. It felt very targeted, and that was, to me, the first thing that I noticed as far as something that was different. Joe, how about you?
Well, it felt, to your point, a lot of those feel personal. The Dylan Klebold, right? The Klebold and Harris, like going back to Columbine, bullied specifically by those kids, and they went after, and it's horrible. Every single one of them is horrible. But this one is, even the media coverage has been more ideology, right? It's really the transgender movement versus Christians, it seems like. And what stood out to me is this is the first time I can remember a shooting happening where we're actually either blaming the victims or we are hardly acknowledging the victims.
It's almost like nobody took the time to stop and just offer sympathy and empathy. It immediately went to, all right, who are we blaming? All right,
this is trans violence. This is
Right.
This is because this school has it in for trans people, and this is what you incite people to. And I saw something on Twitter that I thought was, it's a guy that I followed for a while, and he was just talking about his childhood and how horrible and how traumatic his childhood was with his father, being an alcoholic and the beatings and just really sad stuff. And he's like, and I never once thought about taking out on somebody. And they're defending that person because, well, we don't know what they went through. We don't know the bullying they went through, as though it's okay to shoot people because you had some hardship, because people bullied you, whether that even if that happened. I mean,
there
we
is
don't know
no justification for that.
There's no
Right.
justification, but they're giving it a justification because they know how bad it looks. But this is like the fourth or fifth trans shooter we've had in the last 2 years. This is getting to the militant point. It's getting to the point where, again, we're beyond, oh, it's just an isolated incident, this is scary. Like, we knew these people had mental health problems ahead of time. A lot of them are hurting individuals. We're not saying they're not, but hurt people hurt people. And in this case, that's a really bad thing. They're hurting not from the bullying that everybody says. They're hurting because their families have fallen apart. They're taking it out through their sexuality. And it's horrible. It's horrific to see the way the media is coddling that. And there will be more with the way the media is handling it, in my opinion.
Right. And that was something that was even predicted before it happened. I saw a report a couple days or sometime last week saying, look, if this rhetoric keeps up, there's going to be violence. There's going to be, something's going to happen. When you keep telling people you're under attack, you got to fight back, you're fighting for your life, they're going to take it literally. And images came out online of people holding up things with trans flags on them with guns and says, trans rights or else. And, in fact, this week is supposed to be the Trans Day of Vengeance at the nation's capital. You're going to have a protest. And
they just had protests at Tennessee Capitol and Kentucky yesterday.
Yeah,
and I know for different reasons. I think that was a
right.
gun thing, but I did see trans.
Right.
It looked, the images showed there was trans people there as well protesting.
The Nashville one or the Tennessee one, yeah.
Right. It was kind of part of it rolled into it. And that was part of, you got at this a little bit, Joe, that there was kind of this, and that's why I said I wanted to talk about the reaction, is you're seeing where the culture stands. Like, this is allowing all kinds of information, all kinds of data points on where this conversation stands. And when you've got people saying, well, Tennessee passed a law against transgender surgery, and so they had this coming, that because you did this is what's going to happen, is we're just going to come shoot you. And as you said, no personal accountability, no thought of, well, yeah, you're still not allowed to go shoot somebody, even if you don't like the law, even if you think it's horrific. If they think it's the biggest abomination in the world, you don't get to go shoot, especially children. But that's the cover that's being run for it. And in the midst of this, there is the pushback. There's the, hey, this is not a healthy thing. It was the press secretary. I've always read her name and have not heard it pronounced, Karine Jean-Pierre, whatever, President Biden's press secretary, who said today that the trans community is under attack right now. That is the wrong choice of words, right, in the current circumstances. And so you see the insanity of all this, of, as you said, almost blaming the victims, almost saying they had it coming, almost saying you brought this on yourselves by passing these laws, by being Christians, by not accepting us. And if that, number one, is allowed, number two is allowed to continue, is encouraged to continue, and number three, you continue to feed into this delusion that, hey, you guys are under attack, it's going to keep happening. And so that is like the first negative here of, this is an escalating problem. It's not just an isolated one.
Christians have to be ready, because, again, the culture, as you said, is shifting. This is where persecution starts, is you start attacking Christians and blaming them for it. We've seen this before 2,000 years ago, for them turning the world upside down. And so in my opinion, I think that's how it starts. And I'm not calling for that. I'm not trying to be this is what's going to happen, but I'm saying this is, if it's not checked, and if, as you're saying, Jack, if those things continue, it's tough not to see how this is going to lead to a bigger clash.
Well, and I mean, I've even been guilty of this. I've lived in the South my entire life. We can have a tendency to hear about big events like this or things and think, and we think, oh, that's for maybe the more progressive states, right? The liberal states, that's an issue that's really not going to come down here to the South and come down here to the Bible Belt. It's happened in Nashville. This happened in Nashville, Tennessee. And so if there's people out there that are still under the impression that, hey, we're kind of in our own sheltered bubble here, that is clearly not the case. And man, we talked about this so often, not just on this, but on Think Deeper, about the fact that there's no longer an option for us to just say, well, let's just live our own Christian lives and just, hope they leave us alone and we'll leave them alone. That's not the way it's going to work. Again, these are two conflicting ideologies that are no longer content to just, and we shouldn't be content to let those, let them, alone and let them do their own thing. But they're clearly not going to be content to just have their, do whatever they want to do. This is a war. This is a battle that we're not going to be able to sit out of much longer. Again, this is right in our own backyard down here in the South, down here in the Bible Belt. If that doesn't wake up a lot of people that are thinking that's just out there, that's just out there in space, hopefully this woke them up to it.
I think, to your point about it being a war that's happening, and we don't mean like a war in the street kind of thing at this point, but right, just here's the ideologies coming to a head. I'm not surprised that it's Nashville. I think it is going to be metropolitan areas in red states, in conservative Bible Belt states, where there is a more progressive element, in the Nashvilles, in the Dallases, the Houstons, in places like that, where all surrounding is Bible Belt kind of people, conservative values, that kind of stuff. And then there's that element in the cities that is pushing it in the other direction. That's where the clashes are going to happen, is you're going to see somebody like this who just does not fit with her community identity, and so she's raging against it, and you end up with this problem of again, the two things cannot coexist. And right before we came on, you were mentioning, Will, about how for years there's been the debate over homosexuality and gay marriage and rights and all of these things that Christians have dealt with, but it never came to a head like this. And that's really the point of this is they could try and do the, well, what happens in the privacy of our bedroom is nobody's business kind of thing, which we've seen was a lie all along. But that led to this point where it's, hey, you have to use my name, my pronouns, let me use your
The
like,
vitriol level is so much higher.
well,
is
it's
the way
not
that I
just the
would put it.
vitriol. It's that there is the friction is there. There is no dodging it.
Yeah.
There's no, we'll stay over here, you'll stay over here. It's, you call me by this name, you call me he, and he or she when I'm not.
Or else.
You let me, jump in the swimming pool with your daughters. You let me go into the bathroom. There's a yes or no. There is no dodging the question anymore. And so, like, as you said, Christians who kind of want to do the, well, let's just maintain our lives as possible. That's what we pray for, is that we can lead quiet and tranquil lives, but it's not promised that we're going to get to. And this is where we are at a point where you've got to say, I'm on this side of this. I believe that this is what is right. This is what God has called us to. And so that's what I'm going to stand for.
Well, it's so sad too, because I was reading an article where the pastor at the church, or at the school rather, had met with this young woman for, it sounded like a little while, trying to help her out. And his daughter was one of the ones that was shot. And what you have to realize is, again, it's a mental health issue. They want to pretend that this is the way they're born, they're in the wrong body. They are denying where God created them. It's a mental health issue. And those people, quite frankly, scare. I work in this field, and they a lot of times can. Now, I've worked with trans people that I think can be hurting more than anything. I think they can be hurting. I think they can be confused. But a lot of them, especially those that have taken the testosterone, they're the hormone blockers and all of those issues, they're messing biologically with them, with the structure of things. That creates for very angry, upset people, and that rage will go somewhere. We're starting to see videos where it's not necessarily the shooting, but they're just screaming at people, and there's so much rage. Another one came out earlier this week where a guy went to one of their rallies and they're like throwing hot coffee on him. And I mean, it's just we're starting to see, you poke somebody who's mentally unhealthy, these things can happen. And so I would say to the families out there, we're not trying to incite anything. We're not trying to do anything other than just be careful. Notice where you're going. My wife was going to go down to Nashville today, and thank goodness, because she's got some family in town. Thank goodness that I said, no, we're not going to do that. That I called her in time, because she didn't know that these things are happening. And again, I know that's not just trans, but it's scary times. So make sure you're protecting yourself and your family.
And Joe, you just brought it up. View this as the mental health issue that it is. There can no longer, especially it's popular among young people in the church to kind of sympathize with these people and to kind of, maybe be more on their side as far as, not really calling it what it is. And that is this is the biggest piece of evidence so far that this is clearly a mental health issue. And that's the reason, that we kind of hit around this topic the entire time. That's the reason the media is twisting the narrative just as badly as they are. It's because they know that it's the biggest piece of evidence to this mental health thing that we got going on. And so that would be the other thing that I would say as we get ready to wrap up. If you're somebody who maybe you do sympathize with them a little bit more and are not really viewing it as a mental health issue, view it as a mental health issue, because that's clearly what it is. We've never seen a biological woman, at least of this notoriety type of shooting, go out and do something like this. And so that ought to tell you that there's some things going on that, when you start messing with the way God designed you in that way, that things are going to go wrong. And so again, my plea would be, if you're somebody in the church, somebody who claims a belief in God, somebody who claims Christianity, who is still siding more so again on the sympathy side on the side of, let's get them help. Let's get them the help that they need, to really look at the way God designed them and say, no, that's the way it should be.
They need the gospel. They need truth, no doubt, but
right.
Or they need grace, but they need truth. And that's the gospel. It's both. They need grace. They need love. They need help, but that looks radically different than acceptance of that lifestyle, because we are only enabling mental health, that which can, I'm not saying it does, it can lead to crises like we're seeing on, what happened on Monday.
For sure. I'd just say one last thing is, if you're watching this and you got kids, go spend a minute with them, go hug them, go let them know, like you just see something like, the loss those families went through, but also the family of the shooter. I mean, like that, Not to glorify or glamorize what she did at all, but her parents are mourning as well, and very sad for what all went wrong to lead to that point. And what you're seeing, especially, is with all that is leading to these things, is there are evil elements out there that want your kids, they're trying to lead your kids astray, that will get in your kids' ear and try and pull them down that path. Boy, always be that counterbalance in there, always be protecting them against such things, but let them know you love them, you're there for them, you want to help them through whatever's going on in their life, help them sort these things out, because man, it's a difficult time when you see things like this. And so uh yeah, pray for our country, pray for our world, pray for softened hearts, but pray for strong families as well. I mean, there's just so much that we could get into, but we're going to cut it off right there. Any final thoughts? All right, we'll talk to you guys Monday on Think Deeper, but every Thursday night, 7 o'clock Central, on Facebook Live, Fridays on YouTube if you miss us on Facebook, and we'll talk to you guys next week.